They're selling a jobs plan that has been rejected in Congress. So the president is striking a tone that's more downtrodden than upbeat about his prospects these days. Bill Burton is former White House deputy press secretary and founder of Priorities USA, one of those super PACs. Ann Kornblut is a White House reporter for the Washington Post. Welcome back, Ann.
Thank you.
And author of Notes from the Cracked Ceiling, by the way. And, of course, Liz Sidoti is national political reporter, political editor for the Associated Press. All right. I want to start with what was a downtrodden President Obama in Nevada yesterday, but he's going to go on Jay Leno, where he's got to be upbeat. Here's a clip from his first appearance on Leno as president. Here's what he said about the economy then.
Now, it's only, 59 days now, right?
Yes,
and
59 days.
So much scrutiny. Is it fair to judge so quickly? I mean,
well, look, we are going through a difficult time. I welcome the challenge. I ran for president because I thought we needed big changes, and I do think in Washington it's a little bit like American Idol, except everybody is Simon Cowell.
Wow. Wow.
Well, these days, Bill Burton, it's not just Washington. It's a lot of the country is acting like Simon Cowell with tough words for the president. But you heard earlier the president at the Bellagio, and maybe he didn't do well at the tables, I don't know, really having a tough time making that, saying, look, I know it's not as exciting as it was 4 years ago. What do you tell supporters? You were on the campaign 4 years ago. You're now sort of in a different campaign. What do you say to supporters who are frustrated with the president?
Well, if you look at where President Obama is, it's not that dissimilar to where President Clinton was at this point, and not that dissimilar to where President Reagan was at this point. When you get 3 years in, you've done enough things to sort of make people mad on both sides a little bit. And without the benefit of a choice and the context of what you're doing versus what the other guy would want to do, it's the president is the person who has to take all those arrows. And so I think that we're in a common place for an incumbent president. But as the choice becomes clear, as the Republican nominee emerges, people are going to have a very clear sense of what the difference is between what he's fighting for and what the Republican nominee wants.
Ann Kornblut, when I was listening to the president yesterday, the Bellagio speech, it sort of dawned on me that it's going to be, he better hope he doesn't make the case about a productive second term, because that's not something that happens for many second-term presidents. It's hard for any of them. Reagan, Clinton, Bush, Nixon, all of them struggled having productive second terms.
Well, that's right, and he's going to even have a hard time making the case about a productive final year of the first term. And in fact, he's not even really talking much about the second term. If you listen to what he's saying, he's talking about wanting his jobs bill to be passed in the immediate future. Obviously, that's not going to happen anytime soon. Now he's rolling out these initiatives that the White House can do on their own, talking about mortgage relief. He's doing an initiative on veterans today. He's going to be talking about student loans later in the week. So his focus is really a lot more short-sighted than the second term. And I think Bill's right. I think it's in part because they're waiting for the Republican nominee to emerge. Right. But I'm interested to know what they plan to do in the second term.
Speaking of waiting, the DNC is not waiting, Liz Sidoti. I want to play this new ad that they are running against who they think, I guess, is going to be the Republican nominee in, wait for it, Arizona.
Almost half of Arizona homeowners underwater. Foreclosures everywhere. And what's Mitt Romney's plan?
Don't try and stop the foreclosure process. Let it run its course and hit the bottom.
Mitt Romney's message to Arizona: you're on your own.
Liz Sidoti, obviously a little bit of financial experimentation, seeing if they can find a swing state in Arizona. They're demographically, someday Arizona's going to be a swing state for Democrats, whether it's this time or not. But it's also a little shot at Romney because, by the way, Arizona's an early primary state.
Yeah, and this is something that we've been seeing now for quite a few weeks, where the Democrats clearly look at Mitt Romney as the likely nominee, and Romney's almost feeding into that as well by casting himself as almost this inevitable aura. But what is intriguing is that the Obama campaign is borrowing in large part from the 2004 Bush campaign. And, Bush was running against Kerry at the time and really poked holes in, this Massachusetts liberal and looked at him as a flip-flopper and was tagged him as that very early. And you're seeing the Obama campaign do the exact same thing to Mitt Romney, seizing on his equivocations and outright reversals on various issues. And so I think that, the playbook for the general election, should Mitt Romney be the nominee, we're watching it play out right now.
Bill Burton, any concern that you're creating a stronger potential Republican opponent?
Well, I don't think that Republican primary voters are really going to Priorities USA and the Democratic Party to get their advice on who they ought to support in the general election. I think by pretty much any measure, Mitt Romney is ahead right now. And, the fact that the Democratic Party and the fact that allies of the president are doing things to make sure that people have a clear sense of who Mitt Romney is as we move towards a general election phase is helpful. It's helpful for voters to have a really clear sense of the kind of policies that Mitt Romney would produce.
All right, Bill, Liz, and stick around. We'll talk about Ohio and why I'm here in Columbus after the break. All right, and now for the reason why I'm in Ohio, let's bring back the panel. Bill Burton, Ann Kornblut, and Liz Sidoti. All right, we have a new Quinnipiac poll showing the repeal of so-called SB 5, which is this, which would severely restrict collective bargaining rights for a lot of public sector workers, teachers, cops, firemen. Liz Sidoti, seeing these poll numbers, seeing what happened in Wisconsin when they carved out an exception for police and firefighters versus what we're seeing in Ohio, is it fair to say that the business community may regret that the politicians in Ohio didn't have a carve-out for cops and firefighters?
Yeah, I think that's fair. Look, I'm from Ohio, so I understand that there are a lot of police and fire and folks who look at this. The union strain in Ohio is incredibly strong, and I think that come this election or referendum, you're going to end up seeing the Republican politicians be a little regretful, I think.
Bill Burton, what's the message labor is going to take away if they do succeed in repealing SB 5, and what's the message they should take away, considering that when you go inside some of the proposals in SB 5 here in Ohio, some of them are pretty popular?
Mm-hmm. Well, there's an important corollary to the presidential race, I think, in that voters are going to be able to see in very clear terms what Republican policies will mean for them if there's a Republican president. You've got Scott Walker in Wisconsin. You've got Kasich in Ohio. You've got Rick Scott down in Florida. There's a very clear example of what happens when Republican policies get put into place. And I think the lesson that labor will take from this referendum and from others is that they are on the right side. They're on the side of where the voters are, and Republican policies and this right-wing agenda is far outside the mainstream and is likely to get rejected.
But is there any parts of this, considering that some part of it, Ann Kornblut, when you look at some of these poll numbers, so the idea of contributing more to retirement, contributing more to health care, are proposals that are favored? Labor's got to go into some of these negotiations willing to give more on some of these things if they want to keep their rights. Is that not one of the messages out of this election?
Well, I mean, yes, and we've always seen on certain, on certain measures that the specifics are more popular than the aggregate. So that may be. We'll have to see what happens next week, of course, but or when the election happens. But I think what will be interesting is to see how the White House responds to this and the Democratic Party, because if the measure is repealed, then that's a measure of strength, and if it isn't, then that's I think a signal of how popular perhaps President Obama is in the state. Either way, I think the party has obviously built up some of its infrastructure, and that'll carry forward into next year. But whether the individual aspects of it are popular or not, I think it's probably too soon to tell.
It's interesting, Liz Sidoti. So when you look at this referendum, how much of 2012 do you see? I mean, do you see if labor wins here, you think, okay, maybe the Obama campaign has a better shot in Ohio than secretly they think? You know, it's amazing to me how gloomy they are sometimes about their prospects in Ohio for 2012.
Well, they should be gloomy in Ohio, or about Ohio and their prospects in 2012 there. You know, it is a state that is struggling incredibly. And, you know, like I said, coming from there, I know people who are out of work across the state, and they just kind of wonder, you know, where's the help? And so, you know, this is going to turn out to be a classic situation where, yet again, Ohio, I know, Chuck, you'll disagree with me and say Florida matters the most, but where Ohio, we really will get an incredible sense of which way this election next fall is going to go, simply by looking at whether or not people in Ohio blame Obama for the economic situation, or whether they're willing to stick with him and not take a chance on someone they don't know.
All right. Well, I'm going to have to leave it there. Shameless plug time. Bill Burton, you're first.
I'm going to have to shamelessly plug theRomneyRule.com, which you would have learned about if you followed Priorities USA at Priorities 2012 on Twitter.
That is the ultimate in shameless there. All right, Ann Kornblut.
He's relentless. I'm going to plug my friend and colleague Dana Milbank, who has a nice column on Perry and the birthers today.
And I'm going to play.
Fair enough. And Miss Sidoti.
Sorry.
Yeah, come on now. It is my show still, so come on.
The Marine Corps Marathon is going to be run this weekend in Washington. I want to say congratulations and good luck to everyone who's running it.
And most importantly, please let us all know which bridges will be shut down, and we can decide whether to avoid D.C. altogether. All right, my shameless plug is for folks here in Ohio. Tune in to all the NBC affiliates, and a big shout out to my friends here in Columbus, Ohio, our NBC affiliate here, who've been tremendous in helping me get the show on the air today.